This podfic contains content that may be disturbing for some viewers, including mentions of violence, guns, and physical and emotional abuse. Please check out the complete list of content warnings in the description, and proceed with caution if you are sensitive to these topics. Hello, my lovely little gemstones, it's Saphira, and today I'll be reading When the Chips Are Down by Whiskey with Patron. Chapter 33. Drama practice goes very wrong. Janus didn't like driving, so of course, when the twins asked him to drive them to their theater practice, he hadn't been very partial to the idea. Luckily, when asked if he wanted to join them, Logan said yes, so that solved that problem. Janus would have just asked Logan to take the twins by himself, but he found that he was taking his job to protect them a lot more seriously than he thought he would be. He was going to keep them in his sight as much as he could. Besides, Virgil and Diana would be safe with just DW in the house. While Roman and Remus got their things together, Janus hurriedly put on something a little more professional than a t-shirt and a floppy sun hat. He borrowed Logan's jacket with the Chimera logo on the back, since Logan hardly ever wore it anyways. He opted to leave his hat behind. It might attract too much attention. Now he was in the passenger seat of Logan's car, staring out the window as Logan drove them across the city. The twins bantered back and forth in the back seat, each one holding a script of some sort. They must have been running through some of their lines before practice. Oddly enough, Logan was silent during the drive. That was unusual, but Janus didn't mind the silence. He had too much on his mind to talk much anyway. Unfortunately, the silence couldn't last forever. "Roman, Remus," Logan said, "what play is your drama club performing?"
"Peter Pan!" Roman piped up, practically vibrating in his seat from excitement. "I get to be Peter!"
"Remus, what's your role?" Janus heard the smirk in Remus's voice when he spoke.
"Captain Hook. I wanted to go for the villain. He gets eaten by a crocodile at the end. Makes me wonder what it would actually feel like to get eaten by something. Also, he's got a sick mustache."
"Those roles will suit you both very well," Logan said. "Are you disappointed at all that your costumes will be in each other's favorite colors, though?"
"I'm sure I can pull off a green costume," Roman said. "Don't pull it off during the play," Remus pointed out. "No one wants to see you naked on stage." Roman laughed and smacked Remus's arm with the script. "That's not what I meant, and you know it."
"You might want to save your energy for the stage, boys," Logan said. "We're just about there. We'll remain in the car until you've finished." They both fell silent as Logan pulled into the parking lot of a school. Their doors were open the second Logan parked the car.
"Thanks for the ride,"
Roman called out. He and Remus hurried up the doors as fast as their legs would carry them. Janus watched them go. "They really like theater, don't they?" Was Logan's only response. Janus blinked. That was an unusual response. Logan often spoke much more than this. "How long does drama practice go on for?" Janus asked, in another attempt to spark a conversation. "An hour." Logan's hands were still on the steering wheel, even though he'd already shut the car off. He didn't even look at Janus. Janus turned back to face the dashboard. A small wave of anxiety flared up inside him. Normally, Janus would welcome the silent company, but this was unusual for Logan. He loved to talk. Why was he quiet? Was he upset? Janus wanted to say something else to break the silence, but he didn't know if that would only make things worse. Maybe Logan preferred the silence? Maybe there really was nothing wrong and Janus was overreacting. He knew he tended to blow things out of proportion. Maybe this was just another situation that Janus was reading wrong. But after 10 minutes of pure, uncomfortable silence, Janus had to speak. He tugged on his gloves. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly. Logan blinked at Janus. He inhaled sharply. Oh, Janus, no, I'm sorry. I forgot that you can't..." He cursed under his breath. "I thought you understood why I'm upset. I didn't even explain. I'm sorry. It's nothing. I promise. Please don't worry about it." "You're upset?" Janus asked. Logan gave a sharp nod. "Yes, but it's nothing, really. Don't worry yourself over it." "Is it something I did?" "No," Logan blurted, eyes wide. He cleared his throat and turned away. "No, Janus, you didn't do anything. You don't have to worry about it." Janus reached out and set his hand on Logan's. "Dear, if it's bothering you, I'd like to know how I can help, even if I'm not the cause of it. I care about you. I want to help if I can." "You can't," Logan said, "but thank you." He gave Janus a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I appreciate the concern anyway." Janus furrowed his brow. Logan was hiding whatever was bothering him. Janus had a feeling he knew why. Does this have something to do with earlier? He asked. What happened earlier? Logan asked innocently. You were upset earlier because I couldn't tell you about something related to poison dart. You're still upset about that, aren't you? Logan's shoulders tensed, and Janus knew he'd gotten it right. It's no big deal, Logan said. I really shouldn't be so hung up about it. This is not your fault. It's not something you can help. He tugged his hand out of Janus's grasp. Don't worry about it, Janus. Janus wrung his hands together and bounced his leg up and down. He took a deep breath. He didn't like arguing with Logan, because they both ended up walking on eggshells around each other. Neither of them was fond of confrontation of any sort. They could usually work things out between themselves, but this was one topic that Logan was always too afraid to touch. Janus would have to extend the olive branch first on this one. They sat in silence for a little while, as Janus tried to think of something to say. Logan, he asked finally, if you don't mind me asking, what about this is making you upset? Logan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He bit his lip and averted his gaze, as if he was nervous, or even afraid to say anything. Darling, Janus said, you can tell me. I won't get mad, no matter what it is. I promise. Logan still hesitated, but he loosened his grip on the steering wheel. I'm wondering why you chose to let Emil tell Moggy and Teal about the poison dart situation when you haven't ever told me about it. I know I'm not high up in Chimera, and Moggy and Teal are much more loyal to Chimera than I am, since they don't work for any other gangs, but... He shook his head. I don't know. I feel like it's unfair, even though it makes perfect logical sense to tell them about something they need to know, if they're going to be running Chimera while you're out of the office. I'm sorry, I shouldn't feel like it's unfair. Janus felt a pang of guilt, even though he knew that he hadn't directly caused Logan's distress. He set a hand on Logan's shoulder. Logan, you don't have to be sorry about the way you feel. If you feel that it's unfair, that's perfectly fine. You're allowed to feel the way you feel. Logan tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. It still doesn't feel like I can. Janus's heart pinched. You're allowed to have emotions, dear. Damn the person who ever convinced you otherwise. Logan raked a hand through his hair in frustration and let it stay there, fingers tangled in his brown locks. I know I shouldn't expect you to tell me anything. I know I'm not as important to Chimera as Teal and Moggy, but I just want to know things, and it frustrates me when I can't know. I'm sorry. Janus squeezed Logan's shoulder. I know, honey. I'm sorry that I can't tell you more. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault, Logan said. I really shouldn't have even said anything. I'm sorry. You apologize too much, darling, Janus said, shaking his head. Then what am I supposed to say? Logan huffed. He straightened his tie. I don't know how to fix this, but I should. I'm prying into your business. I'm upset over nothing, and I'm insisting you tell me things that I shouldn't know, and... He grimaced. God, I can't even figure out how I'm supposed to feel about anything. Just tell me that I'm overreacting, and I need to calm down or something. I need to know how I'm supposed to feel. Janus moved his hand from Logan's shoulder to his hand. He gave it a light squeeze. Moonlight, I'm not going to tell you how to feel. You're allowed to feel however you want. Logan grit his teeth and straightened his tie. But He trailed off. Wait, what time is it? Janus had no idea how that was important, but he glanced at his phone. 4:45. Why? Drama practice should be done by now. Janus's eyes widened. He glanced frantically around the parking lot, searching for any sign of Roman or Remus. They were nowhere to be seen. We'll have to continue this conversation later, Janus whispered. Roman burst into the auditorium with a wide grin. Hey, guys! Remus watched as a dozen kids flocked around Roman, shouting greetings and high-fiving him. Remus rolled his eyes. Roman had only met these kids a few times before, and he was already treating them like they were his best friends. Roman could find a way to make friends with a literal garbage can. Remus hugged his script close to his chest, watching as Roman easily socialized with the other kids. An inkling of excitement had lingered in the back of his mind as he walked in, but now that was gone, leaving him with a bundle of anxious nerves with no recollection as to how he ended up in the auditorium at school. You two weren't here Monday. Remus tensed at the sound of a woman's voice right behind him. He slowly turned around, trying to ignore the way his instincts were screaming at him to run away and hide. Their drama instructor, Mrs. Magenta, stood right behind him, a copy of the play's script tucked in her arm. Remus automatically backed away. He didn't get to finish his sentence. He tripped over his own feet and went tumbling to the ground. Pain spiked through his knee and he hissed. He dropped his script to clutch his leg. "Oh, are you okay?" Mrs. Magenta asked. Remus nodded and pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. "Yeah, I'm good. Sorry." He scooped up his script and held it close to his chest. "No need to apologize, Remus," she said with a smile. "If you don't mind me asking, why did you and Roman not show up for practice on Monday?" Remus hesitated. "Something happened with our dad on Monday," he admitted. "We have to stay with a babysitter for a while." Sympathy flashed across her face. "Oh dear, I'm sorry. Is your father okay?" Remus scratched the back of his neck. "I think so. Maybe. We can't see him right now. It's complicated." Mrs. Magenta put a hand to her chest and nodded, looking at him with pity. "I totally understand, Remus. If you and Roman need to excuse yourselves for whatever reason, don't hesitate to let me know. Why don't you go join the others? We'll start reading over our lines soon." Remus hurried off to join the rest of the actors. He stood at the outskirts of the group. None of the others acknowledged him, but Roman caught his eye in the crowd and waved him over. Remus grimaced and gently pushed through the crowd to reach him. Roman wrapped an arm around Remus's shoulders, grinning wide. "Dude, you gotta talk to some people," he whispered. "You're gonna have to interact with your pirate crew anyway." Remus plastered on a smile. "It's okay. I'll be fine." Roman nodded towards one of the kids standing nearby that Remus hadn't noticed. The kid was looking at them expectantly, like he was waiting to speak. "This is Toby," Roman said. Toby smiled and held out a hand. "Hey, you're Remus, right?" Remus swallowed nervously. What kind of kid shook hands like an adult? He grasped Toby's hand to shake it. His intrusive thoughts jutted in, pushing him to grab Toby's hand so tight his fingers break, twist it until his wrist snaps, dig your nails into his skin until he bleeds. Remus let go of Toby's hand as quickly as he could. "You're playing Captain Hook?" Toby said. Remus nodded. "Yeah, you?" "I'm Smee. You're lucky, man. I wanted to be Hook." Remus could only muster an awkward chuckle at that. "Sorry I took your role. I bet you'd make a really good Hook." Toby shrugged. "I'm not too picky about it. I'm only in drama for fun anyway. I'd even be okay with playing Wendy. I think I'd look good in a dress." Roman laughed at that. Remus held his script tighter. Why couldn't they just start going over their lines now? He felt so much more at ease when he was playing a role. He flinched when he heard Mrs. Magenta shout, "Okay, kids, we're about to start going through the next part of our script. I have an assistant with me today. This is my intern, Miss Sharp." A young woman with flaming orange hair smiled and waved at the kids. "Hello, I'm so excited to be here. I look forward to working with each and every one of you." "I don't trust her," said a little voice in the back of his head, and Remus had to agree. He got a really bad vibe from this woman. "Open your scripts to the page you bookmarked last time," Mrs. Magenta called out. The kids all sat down in the chairs as Mrs. Magenta and Miss Sharp stood at the front of the auditorium. Everyone flipped open their script. Remus scanned the page he'd landed on for any of his lines. Toby squinted down at his script. "Mrs. Magenta, we don't have actors for Tiger Lily or Great Big Little Panther." Mrs. Magenta chuckled nervously. "Yeah, we don't have a big enough cast for them. I was thinking we could just borrow some of the Lost Boys or the Pirates to fill their roles, but we might have to do some script revisions and remove them altogether." She flipped through a couple pages. "This play is very racially insensitive." Miss Sharp tilted her head. "Why did we choose to perform Peter Pan?" "The principal decides what we do," Mrs. Magenta sighed. "Anyway, we're skipping past that part for now until I can figure out what to do with it. Take it away, Peter." Roman jumped and looked up. "Oh, sorry." He flipped through a couple pages, glancing over Toby's shoulder to make sure he'd landed on the right one. He cleared his throat and spoke in a clear, loud voice. "Okay, everyone, hang on tight. I'm taking you to the Lost Boys." Mrs. Magenta turned the page. "Peter and the kids go off stage." She pointed at another kid. "Stellar?" The kid playing the voice of Stellar shrank in her seat and mumbled her line. Remus could hardly hear her. Remus shook off his anxiety. He followed the words with his finger as he read out loud. After he finished his line, he glanced up, wondering if maybe he put too much enthusiasm into his voice, or not enough. Roman gave him a thumbs up as Toby read out his own lines. Remus and Toby finished up their little scene, and the Lost Boys took center stage. Toby leaned past Roman to look at Remus. "You did really good, man." Remus managed to smile. "Thanks. You too." They fell silent again as the Lost Boys continued with their scene. Remus turned his gaze to Miss Sharp. His heart skipped a beat when he saw that she was staring right at him. He averted his gaze. He tried to focus on the play, but when he looked up again, Miss Sharp was staring at Roman. Remus glared at her. Something was up with this lady. Mrs. Magenta raised a brow at her script. We can't do this scene without a tiger lily. I'll edit the scene later. Miss Sharp, could you read for Tiger Lily for now, please?
Certainly.
Remus skimmed the next page for his lines as the others went through the scene. He shot a wary glance up at Miss Sharp. There wasn't anything specific about her that set him off, but he still didn't trust her. He turned his attention back to his script as he and Toby entered the scene. Remus winced nearly every time Miss Sharp's loud voice boomed through the auditorium. Eventually, Mrs. Magenta told them all to take a water break. Remus stuck close to Roman, keeping one eye on Miss Sharp as the kids dispersed.
Ro, yeah? Something's weird about Miss Sharp, Remus said. She was staring at us. I get a bad vibe from her.
Roman shrugged.
I'm sure she's fine. She's just an intern anyway. She's not going to be here for the full year, I don't think.
Remus huffed.
Dude, there's something up with her. Come on, man. What is it about her that's so bad?
Roman gestured to Miss Sharp, who was writing on her script. An orange bracelet swung on her arm as she scribbled on the paper.
I don't know specifically, Remus admitted. She's just off.
Roman put a hand on Remus's shoulder.
Chill, Ree. She's just a teacher. You're not listening to me, Remus protested. There's something up with her. Trust me.
Roman heaved a frustrated sigh.
Remus, come on. Just because you're scared of women doesn't mean there's something wrong with the intern.
The kids around them turned to look at the twins. Remus tensed at their gazes. He wished Roman hadn't spoken so loud. Remus hugged his script to his chest.
Right.
Sorry. Roman's face fell.
Remus, I didn't mean to...
Remus turned and walked back to his seat in the auditorium. The rest of drama practice went relatively smooth, but Remus couldn't get Miss Sharp out of his head. Every time he looked up, she was looking right back at him. She kept glancing away at the last second, but it was very obvious she was staring directly at him. When she wasn't looking at him, she was looking at Roman. It felt like ages before practice was finally done. Roman said goodbye to the other kids a couple times, before he and Remus could even begin making their way to the door. Remus was ready to sprint out into the parking lot, but he stopped in his tracks when Miss Sharp's voice shouted out his name. Remus and Roman both stopped before they could leave the auditorium. Remus watched Mrs. Magenta leave, and wished she had stayed for a bit longer. He didn't like her much either, but he definitely preferred her over Miss Sharp. Miss Sharp beamed at the two of them.
You two did a phenomenal job today. You're both very talented actors.
Roman smiled at the praise.
Thank you. You did a good job as Tiger Lily yourself.
Miss Sharp waved a hand.
Oh, thank you, but I was nowhere near as good as you two. You make wonderful foils against each other. I take it you two have been acting together for a while. Actually, this is only our second year in drama, Roman corrected. Well, color me surprised, Miss Sharp said. You two are so talented. I would have thought you'd been acting for years.
Roman scratched the back of his neck, a bashful smile on his face.
Oh, thanks.
Remus grit his teeth. He wanted to leave right now. Miss Sharp's eyes widened.
Oh, shoot. I forgot to ask earlier before everyone left. I already bought some props I want to use for the play, but I left the boxes in my car, and I was hoping to bring them in so I could talk to Mrs. Magenta about them. I was going to ask her to help me grab them so I could show her after practice. We'll help you take them in,
Roman piped up before Remus could say a word. Miss Sharp clasped her hands together.
Aren't you a sweetheart? Are you sure you two will be able to carry some boxes? Absolutely. We need to leave, said the little voice in Remus's head.
He wanted to run out of the school and go right to Logan's car. This lady they didn't even know was asking them to go to her car. How did Roman not find this suspicious?
We should probably be getting home, actually, Remus said.
Roman elbowed Remus in the side.
Oh, come on. I'm sure we can take a few minutes to help.
Miss Sharp started for the auditorium door.
Thank you so much. You are too kind.
Roman followed after her, and Remus had no choice but to do the same. He wasn't going to leave Roman alone with this woman. Roman trusted adults too much. That was going to get himself in trouble one of these days, and Remus didn't want today to be that day. It took Remus a moment to realize he'd forgotten his script in the auditorium.
I forgot my script, he said. Can we go get it? We'll come back and get it, Miss Sharp said. Don't worry.
They turned down a hallway, and Remus narrowed his eyes.
The parking lot is that way, he said, pointing in the opposite direction. I used the teacher's parking lot.
Miss Sharp said. It's just this way. Remus glanced over at Roman. He smiled wide as he walked along behind her. How did he not find anything wrong with this situation? Remus resisted the urge to tear his own hair out in frustration. They stepped outside. Miss Sharp made a beeline for a small car near the edge of the parking lot. Roman trailed after her, and Remus followed, albeit reluctantly. Miss Sharp opened up her trunk. They're just in here. Roman and Remus both approached the trunk. A pit of dread settled in Remus's stomach when he noticed that the trunk was actually empty. Roman furrowed his brow. Where are the... He interrupted his own sentence with a yelp. Remus felt himself being lifted into the air and shrieked in surprise. Hey, put me down! He tried to twist around to see who had grabbed him, but the person pinned his arms to his sides and held him tight. Sorry, kids, Miss Sharp's voice said behind them, but I've got a job to do. She passed by their field of vision as she walked to her car door. A pity, really. You are talented actors. She slid into the driver's seat. Remus opened his mouth to scream, hoping somebody was nearby and would hear, but the person holding him smacked their hand over his mouth. He squirmed and tried to bite down on it, but someone rolled up his sleeve and a sharp pain shot through his arm. His limbs went limp, one by one, like a marionette cutting at strings. He tried harder to squirm, but he only managed to weakly kick his legs. His head spun, like he was floating outside of his own body, vision blurring. He couldn't force himself to move no matter how hard he tried. Put them in the trunk, Miss Sharp's voice snapped. Hopefully, Patton Hart will be willing to give himself up once he sees what we have. Chapter 34. Fuck the police. But not literally. Definitely not literally. Remy hated police, but he hated them even more when they were questioning him about shit he wasn't going to tell them. Thomas was taken away in an ambulance, and only through sheer stubbornness and some fabricated document she had on hand that claimed she was Thomas's cousin was Andy allowed to go with him. The paramedics all seemed suspicious of that, since the two of them looked absolutely nothing alike, but they couldn't force her to stay behind. That left Remy to stay on the crash site and lie through some questions. No, he didn't know who shot the car. No, Thomas and Andy weren't the only ones in the car, but Remy had no idea where the other passenger went. No, Remy didn't know why someone would shoot the car and try to kill Thomas. Yes, Remy was behind the car on his bike when the crash happened, but he didn't know what caused it until he saw the bullet hole in the windshield. No, there was no one he suspected that would have caused this. Remy grimaced as an officer grilled him for answers. There was only so much that he knew, and the stuff he did know, he wasn't about to tell to some cop who wasn't involved in his business. He glanced over at the wrecked car, where more police were searching the wreckage. The detective asked him another stupid question, and Remy heaved a sigh. Look, I don't know everything. I know about as much as you do. Can I go? The detective looked like she was about to respond, but she was cut off when someone else strode up to them. I'll take it from here, Ace Spencer said. The detective raised an eyebrow, but she backed off. Ace crossed his arms with a smug grin. Remy had to look up to glare at Ace. He hated that this prick was taller than him. But then again, most people were taller than him. So, you got yourself into some trouble? Ace said. Remy shoved his hands in his pockets. What's it to you? Ace rolled his eyes. Look, Dormier, I can help you. I know it was probably one of my buddies who did this, and I'm looking to let them off the hook anyway. But you and I have a deal. You help me track down some people, I leave Patton Hart alone. I want to try and get you out of this jam. I don't trust you, Remy scoffed. Ace grinned. I wouldn't trust me either. Just bleep an eye out. Someone wants to take you into the station for questioning, so just answer what she wants, and I'll bust you out later. Remy resisted the overwhelming urge to punch Ace. Someone wanted to take him in for questioning? Why? It would just be a waste of both his and their time. However, he couldn't punch Ace without getting arrested for assaulting a cop, so he settled for a withering glare as Ace walked off. He had to get to the Critic House to make sure Patton was okay. He didn't have time to get questioned. A heavy hand gripped his shoulder. Excuse me, sir. Remy stifled a frustrated groan and turned around. What? His heart nearly stopped when he saw who stood behind him. A familiar policewoman had grabbed his shoulder. A bright orange wristband glared at him from her wrist. She smiled. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Remy grit his teeth through the pain in his wrists. He already hated that he was stuck in an interrogation room, but did that cop really have to handcuff him? Remy was alone in the interrogation room, and had been for about 10 minutes. A cop had just thrown him into the room and left. He had no idea what she was doing or why. He almost hoped she would come back and question him, just so he could get this over with and go back to Patton. The door swung open, and Remy looked up, hoping to see the cop that had taken him in, but his hope turned to annoyance when he saw someone else in the doorway.
The hell do you want?
Ace strode into the room and grabbed the chair opposite Remy. He turned it around and sat so he was straddling the back of it. Just to talk. I'm not the one who wants to question you. That's Officer Chandler's job.
Chandler? That's the name of the bitch who's working with Wrath?
Ace raised his hands. Hey, I didn't know she worked for Wrath. I'm just here to discuss the deal we have. Remy leaned back in his seat. Let me guess. You've already said you'll leave Patton alone, and in return, I'll help you track down some people. But now you want more than just a little help, right? Ace shrugged. I wouldn't mind a little extra something. I'm not going to have sex with you just because you won't kill my friend. Ace spread his hands. Oh, come on. You don't know that's what I was going to say.
Is that what you were going to say?
Ace paused. Maybe. But was I really the worst fuck you've ever had? Remy narrowed his eyes. You were better than some, but I'm not stooping that low just because you won't turn Patton in for money. Well, I am giving up a lot of possible dough by leaving Patton alone. I think I deserve something for making such a big sacrifice. I'll take you for a ride on my bike, Remy offered. Ace's face brightened. You've got a fucking deal. But, Remy said, if I do that, I would also like to ask something of you. Ace raised an eyebrow. What is it?
How attached are you to the people you work with?
Not that much, honestly. I'm just work partners with most of them. We track people down and split the bounties. That's it. Why?
I want you to let me talk to Price Princeton.
Ace smirked. Princey, huh? Why's that?
Let's say I've got some personal issues with her.
And by talk to her, do you mean...
She might not be breathing by the end of our talk.
Ace's grin widened. He chuckled. You haven't changed a bit, have you?
Guess not.
I could probably get her to talk to you, Ace said. But I won't clean up the blood afterwards.
Fine by me.
Ace rested his chin on his hand and leveled his gaze at Remy. After a few seconds of silence, Remy spoke up.
Enjoying the view?
Ace hummed. It's been a while since I've seen you in handcuffs. Remy rolled his eyes.
Don't make that sound sexual. You arrested me, you asshole.
Ace snickered at Remy's annoyance. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a packet of cigarettes. You still smoke?
I don't think you're allowed to do that inside,
Remy reminded him. Ace shrugged and stuck a cigarette in his mouth. Does it look like I give a shit?
Nope.
Remy watched as Ace lit his cigarette. So are you done talking to me, or... Depends. Ace blew a plume of smoke into the air. Do you want me to be done talking to you? Because the second I'm done, someone else is coming in to question you. Remy sighed, considering his options. Ace took the cigarette from his mouth. He turned it around and held the end up to Remy's mouth. Remy automatically leaned forward and took a drag. He blew the smoke right in Ace's face, but Ace just smirked. You're probably better company than the asshole working for Wrath, Remy admitted. Probably. Ace turned the cigarette back around and stuck it in his mouth. She seemed a bit pissed last I saw her. You need to stop back-talking cops, man. Remy snorted.
Are you telling me I have to start watching my mouth?
Couldn't hurt to give it a try. Ace stood. He grabbed the back of his chair and turned it back around so it was facing the right way. He walked around the table towards Remy, taking the cigarette from his mouth along the way. He held the unlit end to Remy. I'll talk to you later, Dormir. Remy eyed the cigarette warily. He glanced up at Ace and raised an eyebrow. Ace cocked his head innocently. What? Remy took the cigarette in his mouth and tugged it out of Ace's hand. He raised his cuffed hands to hold it so it didn't fall. He took a drag and blew the smoke at Ace. I can smoke on my own, thanks. Ace's face split into a smile. He turned and walked to the door. Remy glared after him. God, Ace was such a fucking asshole. Remy had nearly forgotten why he stopped talking to the guy ages ago. Ace left the room, but the door didn't swing shut. Someone else yanked it back open and stepped into the room. The cop smiled as she walked through the door. Doc Martin's guy. Didn't think I'd be seeing you again. I was counting on that, Remy shot back. So, your name's Chandler, huh? Mind if I call you Heather? The cop sat down in the chair across the table. She rested her elbows on the tabletop and leaned towards him, still grinning. Remy found himself missing Ace's company, despite how much he hated him. Remy did not want to be stuck in a small room with this person. So, Chandler started, you know Patton Hart. What does it matter? Remy asked. Chandler narrowed her eyes. You know why it matters. Wrath's blade wants him, so where is he? I won't tell you, Remy said, Besides, everyone's going to know where he is soon anyway. It's not going to be hard to find him. Chandler blinked. A look of understanding flashed across her face. He's at the Critic House. Wow, you're smarter than I thought. Congrats. Oddly enough, the cop's smile only widened. Him being at the Critic House doesn't deter us at all. You do know that you can't kidnap him there, right? Oh, we know. But there are no rules about kidnapping someone he knows who isn't in the Critic House. Remy raised Ace's cigarette to his mouth and inhaled. Let me guess. You have me, so now I'm a bargaining chip to get him out of the Critic House, right? Wow, you're smarter than I thought, Chandler said in a high, mocking voice. Congrats. She leaned back and crossed her legs. But in all honesty, I don't know how useful you'll actually be. We may not need you at all. Now Remy was confused. What? Why not? What do you mean? Chandler just smiled at him. The teeniest bit of fear planted itself in Remy's head. What do you mean? He repeated firmly. Chandler leaned forward, her bright eyes piercing right through him. You're not the only bargaining chip we have on the table. A jolt of panic shot through Remy. Who else do you have? He demanded. Wouldn't you like to know? Yeah, that's why I'm asking, Remy burst. Who is it? Chandler leaned back again. If things go the way we want, and they already have for the most part, we'll have two precious little darlings I'm sure Patton Hart would just love to give himself up for. Why, they're part of the reason he left his home city in the first place, to keep them safe. Her grin widened. I sure hope he remembers that we have no problem with kidnapping children. Remy's blood ran cold. You have the twins, he whispered. He couldn't bring himself to speak louder than that. Wrath had Roman and Remus. Wrath had Roman and Remus. Chandler raised an eyebrow. Are they twins? Sharp hadn't mentioned that when she called me. Interesting. Either way, we have them, so we might not need you at all. Let them go, Remy blurted. You have me. You don't need them. Chandler shrugged. Couldn't hurt to have more than one hostage to work with. Besides, I've got ideas as to what you could do for us. You seem attached to those kids as well. Am I correct in assuming that you know them? Remy said nothing. He didn't want to give her any more advantages than she already had. You might want to answer my questions, Docs, she said. I can contact the people who have these kids and ask them to give you some incentive to respond. Maybe you'll be more inclined to help if these twins start losing some fingers. An ice-cold wave of horror washed over Remy. You wouldn't. Not for something this small. I've cut the fingers off people who have looked at me wrong, Chandler snorted. You really think I wouldn't have someone harm your kids for not answering my questions? She sighed. But I guess you already answered my question. You do know them. But I have something else to ask you. Just how far would you go to keep these kids safe? Be honest. Remy hesitated. Just about anything, he admitted reluctantly. He turned the cigarette in his fingers. He stamped it out on the table. Smoke trailed into the air from the burnt stub. So, if I say jump, Remy grimaced. How high? Chandler chuckled. She looked like she was having way too much fun with this. You have two choices, Docs. You can let Patton Hart stay safe and sound in the Critic House and not even tell him that his precious kids are in danger, condemning these children to days of torture until they die. Or you can tell him the consequences if he doesn't turn himself in, giving him to us and freeing these kids you care so much about. A hard decision, I know, which is why I'll be keeping you in a holding cell overnight so you can mull it over. If you haven't made your choice by morning, we'll simply track Patton down ourselves, tell him about us kids, take him in, and then kill you and the twins. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Their lives are in your hands, Docs. Don't fuck it up. She strode across the room and left. The door banged shut with the finality of a judge's gavel. Remy stared down at the table through his sunglasses. He waited as his brain processed everything that he'd just been told. Keeping Patton and his kids safe just became a lot more difficult. Chapter 35. Don't tell Virgil, but his brothers were kidnapped. Janus and Logan burst into the school in a panicked frenzy. Where do they practice? The auditorium, Logan answered. He hurried down the hall as fast as the still healing wound in his side would let him. Janus tried to match his pace. He hoped no one would try to question them as to why they were here. He wouldn't have any answers that wouldn't betray his panic. Logan opened the door to the auditorium. Janus followed him inside, praying that the drama instructor was still here so they could ask some questions. Luckily, they spotted a teacher in a purple dress, walking through the aisles of chairs, picking up discarded scripts and mumbling to herself. Janus and Logan rushed towards her. "Magenta," Logan called. The woman looked up. "Logan, what are you doing here? I thought you were on sick leave." "I had to take a leave for some personal reasons," Logan said. "I told you earlier this year that I help homeschool Roman, Remus, and their brother every second day, correct?" "Yes." Magenta's grip tightened on the scripts in her hands. "Oh, are you the one who's taking care of them? Remus mentioned that something happened with their father." "Actually, the duty of babysitting the kids has been left with my partner, Janus Chimera." Logan gestured to Janus. "We were both waiting for the kids in the parking lot, but they never showed. Do you have any idea where they might have gone?" Worry flashed across Magenta's face. "Oh dear, I thought they'd already gone home. Can you call them?" "Neither of them have phones," Logan said. Magenta tapped her fingernails on the scripts. "Oh goodness, last I saw them they were talking with my intern. I had to go put my things back into my classroom. When I got back here they were gone, so I thought everyone went home." Janus resisted the urge to swear. "We don't know where they are. Please, I need to make sure these children are all right." "Could we perhaps ask your intern where they might be?" Logan asked. "Absolutely. She might be in my classroom if she hasn't already gone home." "Thank you." Logan turned. "Come on, Jan." Janus followed Logan out of the auditorium. They found Magenta's classroom quickly. One peek through the door told them that Magenta's intern wasn't in there. Janus made a distressed whining sound in his throat. "Where could they be?" Logan led Janus back out into the parking lot. "I'm going to get my laptop. I might be able to get into the school's cameras, so we can figure out where they were last." They rushed out of the school and back to their car. Logan grabbed his laptop from the back seat and started typing before he even sat back down in the driver's seat. Janus clambered into the passenger seat to peer over Logan's shoulder. Every tap of his keys felt like a lifetime. "Got it." Logan shifted the laptop to let Janus see easier. They were in the auditorium talking to this woman. The footage is from 7 minutes ago. Janus squinted at the screen. A ginger woman stood in the auditorium, talking to the twins. Remus shifted his weight as if he was uneasy, but Roman smiled as he spoke with the woman. Janus couldn't hear what they were saying, but Roman looked absolutely delighted to be speaking with someone. The woman led the kids out of the auditorium. Logan switched between the cameras as the three of them walked through the hallway. They approached a door, and Logan brought up another camera view, this one in another parking lot outside. Janus watched with growing anxiety as the ginger woman led Roman and Remus to a car. He saw two people enter the frame from the side, and he wanted to scream at the screen, telling the twins to run, but he could do nothing but watch as the two newcomers grabbed the kids. Remus flailed and opened his mouth to scream, but the person who had grabbed him rolled up his sleeve and jabbed a needle in his arm. Remus went limp, as did Roman. The people shoved them in the trunk of the car before climbing into the back seat. The woman drove off. Janus bounced his leg up and down. "You got their license plate?" "Yep." Logan paused the video feed and zoomed in on the plate on the back of the car as it drove away. "I'm going to need you to drive so I can track them down." Janus and Logan quickly switched seats. Janus backed out of the parking lot and drove it into the street. He may have gone a little over the speed limit, but a speeding ticket was the least of his worries. "Where are we going?" Janus asked. "I'm getting into the street cameras and trying to find them. And we will find them, even if I have to break down Wrath's door myself." Janus turned on his turn signal. "While you're doing that, we're stopping at the bank. If we're going to do a rescue mission, we're going to need some help." "Good idea." Logan's fingers danced on the keys of his laptop. "If it's Wrath we're dealing with here, we're going to need the backup. Should we bring in DW for help?" No, she's had a hard day. We can handle this. And we're not telling Virgil about this until his brothers are safe. I don't want him to panic." Logan nodded once. "Got it." "I want every available hacker we have going through the street cameras and every other camera system they can get into. If you can get into Wrath's systems, that's even better. I need to find out where this woman took these kids as soon as fucking possible." Logan sat back in his chair and focused on his screen as Janus barked orders to the rest of Chimera. As soon as he and Janus arrived at the bank, Janus called an emergency meeting and gathered every available employee in the main meeting room. A large table dominated the floor, surrounded by as many chairs as they could possibly fit around it. Every single chair was occupied at the moment, and other agents that didn't have a seat simply stood by and listened to Janus speak. As Logan rapidly flicked through different cameras and tried to hack into others, he let Janus's voice stay mostly in the background of his focus. That was a bit difficult, however, because his voice was loud and unrestrained, which was rare happenstance. Logan almost wanted to throw his laptop. He had seen footage of the car driving down the streets toward the southern end of the city, but he couldn't figure out any more than that. Every time he tried to find footage from the time that the car should have passed by a specific camera, nothing came up. It was like someone had gone in and erased it before he could find it. While you were all working on that, Janus continued, I'm going to get as much backup as possible in case we do need to break into Wrath's headquarters. I need all of you to try as hard as humanly possible to find these kids. I'm not going to rest until we at least know they're alive. Logan grit his teeth in frustration when the cameras came up with nothing again. Someone must have already gone in and deleted the footage that was tracking the car. That was the only explanation he could think of. But even then, he should still be able to find it. Everything connected to a network still existed to some degree, whether it was deleted or not. He should have been able to dig it up, but somehow it was impossible. Was there something he had to do that he didn't know about? He had done everything he could think of to retrieve the street camera footage he was missing, but nothing worked, no matter how many times he tried. Logan pushed his laptop away from him and put his head in his hands. He couldn't find them. He couldn't do it. What was he missing? What couldn't he do? Was he just not skilled enough? He raised his head again. That might actually be it. He was well aware that, despite his skill, he was not the best hacker in the business, not by a long shot. Perhaps he just needed someone who had a little more expertise. But who to ask? He wasn't familiar with any other hackers personally, aside from others employed by Chimera. Janus might know of some people, but the man was busy giving everyone descriptions of what to look for and instructions on what to do, so Logan wasn't about to bother him. Teal, Moggy, and all the other agents present were listening intently, and if they were going to help, they needed to listen to Janus. Logan wouldn't distract them. In an act of desperation, Logan opened up a dark web tab and loaded the forums he frequented. He went to his most recent messages and scrolled through them. Someone there must have been better at this than he was. Scrolling through his DMs, however, he couldn't think of anyone who might be more skilled and willing to help him. He might just have to hire someone. He was about to close the forums again when he spotted his most recent message. His cursor hovered over the conversation he had with the user My Chemical Anxiety over Patton's state of well-being. Perhaps... He clicked on the messages. He hesitated, fingers resting on the keys of his laptop. Maybe this wasn't the best idea. This was Chimera and Wrath business. Getting others involved might only worsen the situation. But then again, he really did need help. Logan racked his brain for the right words to say. He poised his fingers over the keyboard, and after a moment's pause, he began to type. It was insanely difficult for Andy to get into the hospital to be with Thomas. She was able to bluff her way into the ambulance, but no one in the hospital believed her when she said she was Thomas's cousin. She couldn't fault anyone for being observant. Thomas was the whitest bitch Andy knew, and Andy was very obviously not white. Still, it was frustrating as hell to try and convince anyone to let her in with them. She eventually stayed in the waiting room, with no idea of whether or not she would be allowed into his hospital room after the doctors removed the bullet. To keep herself distracted, she stuck her technological fingers into almost every camera in the hospital. When she got bored of that, she turned her attention to cameras in other places outside the hospital. No matter how much she tried to distract herself, her thoughts kept wandering. They went from what condition Thomas might be in, to how Remy was doing, to Patton's situation. Sometimes her brain turned to thoughts about Price, but that just made her angry and sad, so she pushed those thoughts away. Time seemed to crawl at a horribly slow pace, so she was relieved when a nurse walked into the waiting room and called her name. She shoved her laptop back in her bag and stood. "Right here. I'm with Thomas Sanders." The nurse nodded. "Ah, right. You're his cousin, correct?" "Yeah. Distant cousin, but related." "Okay. Follow me." The nurse turned and walked through the door she'd just come from. Andy shouldered her laptop bag and hurried after her. They passed by a dozen doors on their way through the halls. Andy knew Thomas was likely fine, since it was only an arm wound, but she couldn't help but be a little anxious. The nurse led her to a door and opened it. "He's in here." Andy peered inside. Sure enough, Thomas was lying in a hospital bed, unconscious. His right arm was wrapped in bandages. Andy stepped into the room, and the nurse followed. "We were able to remove the bullet easily. Nothing was damaged too badly, but it still may be difficult for him to use his right arm. He'll be out for a bit, but he's in a stable condition. He should be able to leave as soon as he wakes up." Andy breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you." The nurse nodded. "Would you like to stay with him until he wakes up?" "Yeah, thanks." "Call for a nurse if anything happens." The nurse left and shut the door. Andy walked up to the bed and looked down at Thomas. The heart rate monitor next to the bed was beeping steadily, and he didn't look dead, so Andy figured he'd be okay. She sat down in a chair next to the bed and brought out her laptop again. She was worried about Remy, so maybe she would get into the cameras at the police station and see if he was okay. Before she could do that, though, she wanted to check up on Patton. There were no cameras in the Critic House, so she opened the hacker forums. Typing Patton's name into the topic search bar brought up no new posts about him being caught. A notification on her DMs caught her eye. She didn't often get messages here. She clicked on it. Oddly enough, it was a user she recognized, Logic and Crofters, the same one she'd spoken to about Patton a couple days ago. She hadn't expected another message from them. She clicked on it, a little hesitant. She skimmed the message. By any chance, are you affiliated with Wrath's Blade? Andy stared at the message, utterly confused. Why was this random person asking her about her affiliations? She hesitated, and then answered, No, I'm not. Why? She waited a minute for an answer, and sighed when she finally got one. This person apparently liked to type. A lot. I'm trying to track down a certain person who kidnapped a couple of Patton Hart's children that Chimera is protecting. I have reason to believe that this person is working with Wrath, hence the clarification that you don't work for them. Chimera is trying to look through street cameras in Clawmore for the vehicle the kidnapper used, but it seems someone was already trying to cover their tracks, because I can't find the vehicle anywhere. I hate to admit it, but I don't believe I'm skilled enough to recover this lost footage that we need. And it seems other hackers in Chimera can't figure it out so far either. If this is up to your skill level, I would be willing to pay for your services. Andy read the message a couple times, considering how she should respond. She knew Chimera was taking care of Patton's kids, and the fact that this person knew that too could be a sign that they were trustworthy. Then again, they could have just hacked into Chimera's cameras the same way Andy did. Andy absently tapped at her keys as she thought about her words. She typed out a quick response. This is the second time you've messaged me about something related to Patton, and I don't trust it, TBH. I'm gonna need some proof that I can trust you before I do anything else for you. Do you really work for Chimera? Another message popped up after a minute of waiting. If you like, you can try and hack into Chimera's cameras to spot me. It would show me that you're a skilled enough hacker to help me, and it would prove to you that I'm not working with Wrath. Andy raised a brow. Hacking into Chimera's cameras was easy, at least for her. Sure, they had dozens of protections against hackers in their systems, but Andy had loopholes into almost every major organization in the area. She snorted. This is your big test, Logic? She muttered. She pulled up multiple feeds from different cameras in Chimera. She sifted through them until she found the view of the meeting room on the second floor down. Almost every person in the building was gathered there, sitting around the big table that took up most of the room. Janus Chimera himself stood at the head of the table as he shouted orders to everyone else. There was only one person in the room that wasn't looking at Janus. A man in a black polo shirt and a blue tie sat in the chair at Janus's right side. The light reflected off his glasses, obscuring his gaze, but Andy could tell he was facing the camera in the room. A laptop sat on the table in front of him. Found you, Andy typed. Guy in the blue tie, glasses, black shirt, right next to the boss. The man in the camera looked down at his laptop. He typed, and a message popped up on Andy's screen. How did you do that so quickly? I've had loopholes into this place for ages. You guys have really good security, but it's nothing I can't get past. Bet I could probably get into your laptop, too. That won't be necessary. It's clear you're likely able to complete the tasks I need help with. Aight, give me some details. Can't do shit if I don't know what I'm doing. Andy sat back and waited as Logic and Crofters rapidly typed out a response. She watched him on her view of the cameras, just for something to do while she waited. He didn't look anything like Andy had expected him to, but honestly, she didn't even know what she was expecting. She went back to her messages and saw that a new one had popped up. A woman who works at Sanders Middle School in Clawmore kidnapped 2 children. They disappeared somewhere at around 4:40 p.m., last seen with a red-headed woman who works as an intern for Magenta Lee, the drama teacher. The kids' legal names are Roman and Remus King. They're 11-year-old Hispanic boys, both with dark brown hair and brown eyes. Remus has a bleached streak in his hair and wears a green hoodie. Roman's hair is longer than Remus's, and he often wears a red jacket. I saw the kidnapper's car heading to the northeast end of the city, but the camera footage I need was deleted, and I can't find the vehicle anywhere. I will send you a picture of the vehicle and license plate. Will you be able to take things from there? Yeah, fam, I got it. I'll get back to you in a bit. An image of a gray car in a mostly empty parking lot appeared in her messages. It was likely a photo taken from the school's security cameras, because the quality wasn't the greatest, but she could still make out the license plate. Andy cracked her knuckles and got to work.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this series. If you like what you hear and you want to read more, you can find the link to the fic and the author in the description.
If you want to check out other podfics I've done, you can click on the playlist linked on the screen. See you next time!